The morning it ended, Vivian Holt Crane didn't cry. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom she'd shared with her husband for 9 years and watched his mother, Sylvia Crane, 61 years old, silver hair pinned back like she was posing for a portrait, open Vivian's closet and begin pulling blouses from their hangers. Not frantically, not with anger. Methodically, the way you clean out a storage unit you've been meaning to get to for years. "Mother." That was all Vivian said. Sylvia didn't turn around. She folded a cream silk blouse that Vivian had bought herself the year she made partner, folded it the wrong way, corners mismatched, and placed it on the floor beside the open suitcase like it was a donation pile. "You knew this day was coming," Sylvia said. "Don't make it ugly." Vivian's husband, Elliot Crane, 38, vice president of Crane Medical Holdings, was standing near the window with his arms crossed and his eyes fixed somewhere beyond the glass. He hadn't looked at her since she walked in. The woman sitting on the edge of the bed, the one who had been calling his cell phone at 11 o'clock at night for the past 7 months, was named Bryn. She was 26. She worked in Elliot's acquisitions division, and she was wearing a blouse that cost more than Vivian's first paycheck, and she had the particular kind of stillness that comes from having already won. "Elliot," Vivian said. He finally looked at her. "The papers are on the table downstairs. My attorney reviewed everything. It's fair." Vivian, 36, stood very still. She was still wearing her coat because she'd come straight from the hospital, not as a patient, not as a visitor. She was Vivian Holt Crane, 36, Chief Medical Officer and silent majority shareholder of Holt Meridian Health Systems, the company that had, for the past 3 years, held a binding service contract with Crane Medical Holdings worth $240 million. She had never told Elliot that she owned it. Not when they met at a charity gala, not at their wedding, not over 9 years of dinners and arguments and Sunday mornings. She had kept that part of herself the way some people keep a safety deposit box. Not out of secrecy exactly, but out of a quiet private certainty that love should not be transactional. She had been wrong about a great many things. Vivian looked at the suitcase on the floor. She looked at Bryn. She looked at her mother-in-law folding her clothes the wrong way. "I'll review the papers," she said, and she went back downstairs. She had grown up in Allenfield, Ohio, the youngest daughter of a family that had built its money quietly and kept it quieter. Her father, Roland Holt, had founded Holt Meridian as a regional clinic network in 1987 when Vivian was 9 years old. By the time she turned 22 and entered medical school, the company had expanded to 14 states. By the time she finished her residency, her father was dead and had left her 43% of the company. She earned the rest of her shares through 11 years of decisions her brother Preston had disagreed with and the board had resisted, and that had, without exception, been correct. She had never wanted to be the face of it. That was the piece people always misunderstood. Vivian preferred the clinical work, the late nights in the operating suite, the morning rounds, the part where you looked at a problem and solved it with your hands. She had structured the company so it could run without her name on everything. She had a very good executive team. She had a chief of operations named Gerald Foss, who had worked with her father and who understood that Vivian's preferred management style was to be left alone unless something was on fire. She had met Elliot Crane at a fundraiser for pediatric cardiac research. He had talked to her for 45 minutes about hospital systems, and she had thought, "Here is a man who understands my world." She had not told him which part of that world she occupied. He had never asked. They had been together for 2 years before she understood that Elliot had married her in part because he believed she was simply a physician, successful, accomplished, educated, all the right things, but ultimately the kind of wife who would move through his world and make it look better, not the kind of woman who ran a company twice the size of his family's. She had told herself it didn't matter. She had been wrong about that too. The papers were on the kitchen table, a leather folder, very clean, very organized. Elliot's attorney, a man named Burrell, had done careful work. The terms were structured so that Vivian would receive a portion of their shared real estate, a modest settlement, and a non-disclosure provision regarding the terms of the dissolution. Vivian sat at the kitchen table with her coat still on and her keys still in her hand, and she read every page. Her phone buzzed. It was Gerald Foss. "The Crane Holdings renewal came across my desk this morning," he wrote. "Their CFO submitted a preemptive renegotiation request. They want to reduce the service fee by 18% and extend our exclusivity clause by 4 years. I told them you'd respond by Friday. Thought you should see it." Vivian read the message twice. She set the phone face down on the table. Upstairs, she could hear Sylvia moving through the closet. She could hear Elliot's voice, low and even, the way he always spoke when he was managing a situation. She had loved that about him once, his composure, his ability to hold a room. Now she understood that it was less a quality and more a technique. She picked the phone back up and typed, "Hold the response. Don't say anything to their team. I'll call you tomorrow." Then she opened the leather folder again and turned to the last page, where the signature line waited. She did not sign it. She closed the folder and left it on the table and went upstairs to pack what remained of her things herself, because she would not leave that to Sylvia. Vivian moved into the apartment she kept on the west side of the city, a two-bedroom she had never quite given up, even after the wedding, which Elliot had called impractical and she had called sensible. She had been, as it turned out, sensible. She slept better than she expected to. She woke up at 5:15, the way she always did, and made coffee, and sat in the window with the city still dark below her, and thought about the Crane Holdings contract. The contract had been structured by her team 4 years ago, before Elliot's father, Douglas Crane, had stepped back from the company and handed operational control to Elliot. The original deal had been Vivian's idea, a long-term service agreement that positioned Holt Meridian as the exclusive clinical operations partner for Crane's network of specialty facilities. It was good for Crane because it stabilized their costs. It was good for Holt Meridian because it gave them market access in 3 regions they'd been trying to penetrate for a decade. What Elliot didn't know, what Douglas had never told him, because Douglas Crane was an old-school businessman who had understood very clearly who he was negotiating with, was that without the Holt Meridian contract, Crane Medical Holdings could not sustain its current operational model. Their specialty facilities had been built around the assumption of continued clinical partnership. Their staffing structures, their credentialing systems, their insurance billing frameworks, all of it ran through the infrastructure Holt Meridian provided. Pull the contract, and Crane would need 18 to 24 months and a capital expenditure of somewhere between $60 and $80 million to rebuild independently. Crane's current liquidity position, as Vivian happened to know from their public filings, could not support that. She finished her coffee. She rinsed the cup. She called Gerald Foss at 7 in the morning. "Decline the renegotiation," she said, politely. "Tell them the current terms remain as structured, and pull the auto-renewal clause. Put it on my desk for manual review in 30 days. Gerald was quiet for a moment. He knew better than to ask questions Vivian didn't invite. "Done," he said. She did not contact Elliot. She did not contact his attorney. She went to work. For 3 weeks, she went to work. She reviewed the quarterly performance reports. She approved 2 new facility acquisitions in the Mid-Atlantic region. She sat through a board meeting in which her brother Preston argued that they were overexposed in the Midwest, and Vivian explained, calmly, why he was mistaken. She operated on a Tuesday morning and consulted on 2 complex cases by Thursday afternoon. She answered Gerald's emails promptly. She did not check Elliot's social media. She did not call anyone from his family. She signed nothing. On a Wednesday in the 3rd week, she received a call from a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail. It was Douglas Crane, Elliot's father. His voice on the message was careful, measured, the voice of a man who had built something over 40 years and was beginning to feel it shift beneath him. "Vivian, I'd like to speak with you. I think there are some things we should discuss. Please call me when you have a moment." She called him back that evening. Douglas Crane, 67, founder and chairman emeritus of Crane Medical Holdings, had the particular dignity of men who had made their money through genuine effort and knew the difference between a negotiation and a performance. He got to the point within 2 minutes. "Our operations team is getting questions from Holt Meridian's account managers," he said. "The renewal paperwork hasn't moved. There's talk of a review process. I want to understand what's happening." "The contract is under review," Vivian said. "Standard process." A pause. "Vivian, we've worked together for 4 years. I'd like to understand if there's a problem I should know about." Vivian was standing at her apartment window, watching the lights of the city arrange themselves in the dark. She said, "Douglas, your son is asking me to sign divorce papers. I imagine you knew that." The silence on the other end was a different kind of silence than the one before it. "Vivian, I'm not going to make this a transaction," she said. "I want to be very clear about that. The contract review is a business matter, and it will be handled as a business matter. But I'm not going to pretend that the last 4 years of my life didn't happen. I'm going to take the time I need." She paused. "I'll be in touch." She ended the call. She stood at the window for a long time. The Crane Holdings board meeting was scheduled for the first Thursday of the following month. Vivian knew this because Holt Meridian held a seat on the advisory panel. A quiet structural arrangement that Douglas had agreed to when the original contract was signed. The kind of provision that seems standard until it becomes significant. She did not attend the meeting herself. She sent Gerald. Gerald Foss, 53, had worked in healthcare administration for 30 years and had the particular skill of being completely unremarkable in rooms full of important people. He sat in the corner. He took notes. He listened. What he reported back to Vivian was thorough and unsurprising. Crane's CFO had presented a cash flow analysis that showed significant operational strain in the current quarter. The board had asked questions about the Holt Meridian contract status that the CFO could not definitively answer. Elliot Crane, at the head of the table, had said several things with great confidence that Gerald characterized diplomatically as optimistic projections. One board member, a woman named Constance Wythe, who had joined the board 18 months ago and about whom Vivian had heard good things, had asked pointed questions about dependency risk and contingency planning. Elliot had moved past them. "How did he seem?" Vivian asked. Gerald considered. "Like a man who's certain the contract will renew." Vivian nodded. "Keep the advisory seat active. I want notes from next month's meeting too." Elliot called her on a Sunday afternoon. She was reading. She answered because she had decided some time ago that she would not perform avoidance. "The papers are still not signed," he said. There was an edge beneath the evenness of his voice. She had learned to hear it over 9 years. "I'm aware. Vivian, my attorney says, I know what your attorney says. I've read the documents." A pause. "Is there something you want to discuss?" "Not particularly." "Then what's the delay?" She turned a page. "Elliot, when did your company's contract with Holt Meridian come up for renewal?" A beat of silence, different from before. "That's not relevant. It's just a question. It's handled. There's nothing for you to." He stopped. And she could hear in that stopping the precise moment that a door opened in his mind that he had not known was there. "Vivian, yes, what are you saying?" "I'm not saying anything," she said. "I'm asking about a contract renewal. It's a business question." He hung up. She learned about it on a Monday, the way she learned most things, from Gerald's morning briefing delivered by email with an attached news brief. Crane Medical Holdings had issued a public statement acknowledging a temporary operational disruption in their specialty facilities network. 3 facilities in the southeast had reduced operating hours. Their stock had dropped 6% in 2 days. Analysts were asking questions. The statement attributed the disruption to transition planning and promised resolution in the near term. Vivian's phone rang. It was Elliot's attorney, Burrell. She let it ring. It rang again. She answered, "Mrs. Holt Crane." Burrell was professional, contained, and completely unable to hide the purpose of his call beneath the professional containment. "I'm reaching out regarding the dissolution terms and—" "I'm aware of what you're reaching out about," Vivian said. "Please tell Mr. Crane's team that I'll be in contact directly through my own counsel when I'm ready, not before." She hung up. Then she called her own attorney, a woman named Paige Alderton, who had been Vivian's counsel for 11 years and who understood Vivian's priorities in a way that required very little explanation. "I want to restructure the settlement terms," Vivian said. "I want the non-disclosure provision removed entirely. I want the real estate distributed cleanly. And I want the final agreement to note, for the record, that I am signing of my own volition and without duress." Paige was quiet for exactly 1 moment. "That's all? That's all? No claim on the business interests?" "His business interests are not my concern." Paige had been a lawyer for 23 years. She did not say what Vivian knew she was thinking. She said, "I'll have a counter-proposal drafted by Wednesday." It was Douglas Crane who came to see her in person, not Elliot, Douglas. He called ahead and asked if she would meet him for coffee, and she said yes, because she respected Douglas Crane in the way you can respect someone even after their family has treated you badly, not without reservation, but without dishonesty either. He looked older than the last time she'd seen him. He stirred his coffee and he said, "I owe you an apology." Vivian waited. "I knew about Bryn before Elliot told me," he said. "I should have said something. To you. I didn't." He set the spoon, she agreed. "Sylvia, my wife, she has opinions about things that I let her express without enough pushback." He looked at his coffee. "That's also wrong." "Yes." He looked up. "Vivian, the contract." She met his eyes. "What about it?" "I am not asking you to use it." She tilted her head. "I'm asking you not to," he said. "But I want to be honest with you. I know that the company is in a difficult position. I know that position is partly because Elliot made assumptions he should not have made. And I know," he paused, "I know what Holt Meridian is. I know who you are. I understood it when I signed the first agreement 4 years ago. I don't think Elliot ever asked." Vivian wrapped both hands around her cup. "He didn't. I should have told him." The cafe was warm. Outside, it was mid-autumn, grey and clean. A woman was walking a very small dog past the window, and the dog stopped to investigate something invisible on the sidewalk, and the woman waited with the patience of someone who has nowhere urgent to be. "Douglas," Vivian said, "the contract decision is a business decision. It will be made on business terms. Whatever has happened between me and your son will not factor into it." He nodded. His jaw was tight. "But I want you to understand something," she continued. I did not use my company as a weapon. I did not call in favors or accelerate any timeline or instruct my team to create problems for Crane Holdings. What is happening to your operational capacity right now is a consequence of decisions your son made about the structure of his business. Decisions he made while assuming that certain things would continue to be handed to him. She paused. I simply stopped handing. Douglas was quiet for a long moment. You're going to renew it. I haven't decided, but you're considering it. I'm considering everything I should have been considering for a year, she said, including what terms make sense for Holt Meridian going forward. He nodded slowly. He picked up his coffee. He said, very quietly, he didn't deserve you. Vivian looked out the window. The woman and the dog had moved on. No, she said, he didn't. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday in November. Paige filed the executed documents. The non-disclosure provision had been removed. The settlement was modest and clean. Vivian walked out of her attorney's office into a grey Thursday afternoon and stood on the sidewalk for a moment and breathed. Her phone had 3 messages. Gerald about a board briefing. Her older sister Claudine, who had said nothing useful during the marriage but who called regularly now, and was, Vivian had decided, trying her best, and a text from a number she recognized as Elliot's, which she read once and then put the phone in her bag. It said, I didn't know. She thought about that for a while. She thought about all the things it could mean and all the things he might have meant by it. She thought about 9 years of Sunday mornings and the way his voice had sounded during the phone call when he first understood what Holt Meridian was, that stopping, that particular silence. She did not reply. 3 weeks after the finalization, Vivian sat across from Gerald and 2 members of the Holt Meridian board in a conference room on the 14th floor and reviewed the Crane Holdings contract renewal analysis. The numbers were clear. The Crane facilities, restructured over the previous 2 months with significant effort and emergency capital expenditure, were stabilizing. They were not where they had been, but they were not in freefall. Elliot had hired a new operations director, and the board had brought in outside consultants, and the company was, as Constance Wythe had apparently told her fellow board members, doing the work they should have done 2 years ago. The Holt Meridian team had prepared 3 options: renewal on adjusted terms, renewal on original terms with a shortened exclusivity clause, non-renewal with a 12-month transition support agreement. Vivian read each one. She asked 3 questions. She listened to the answers, then she said, Option 2. Shortened exclusivity, performance benchmarks added, quarterly review built in, and I want a formal clause removing the auto-renewal function permanently. All future renewals go to manual approval. Gerald made a note. One more thing, Vivian said. The advisory seat. Restructure the reporting terms so it functions as genuine oversight rather than a courtesy position. If they want the contract, they accept real accountability. Constance Wythe accepted, Vivian was later told, without asking a single question. Elliot did not respond personally. His new operations director signed the agreement on behalf of the company. The paperwork went through on a Tuesday in December, processed by a junior contracts manager who had no idea what the document represented or what it had cost the previous year to keep in place. In January, Vivian flew to Phoenix for a clinical conference. She presented research she'd been working on for 2 years about care delivery models in underserved rural markets. She had 47 minutes on the main stage, and she went 3 minutes over and nobody minded. She ate dinner alone at a restaurant near the hotel, and she ordered the thing she wanted rather than the thing that seemed appropriate, and she sat with a glass of wine and looked at the other people in the room, couples, small groups, a woman about her age reading something on a tablet, and she felt, for the first time in longer than she could name, entirely like herself. Her phone was in her bag. She left it there. She thought about what Douglas had said, he didn't deserve you, and she thought about the fact that she wasn't sure deserve was the right frame for any of it. She had made choices. She had kept a part of herself private for reasons that had made sense at the time and had turned out to be the wrong kind of protection. She had stayed in rooms where she should have left sooner. Those were her choices, not things that had been done to her, and she intended to make different ones. The wine was good, the restaurant was warm. Outside the window, Phoenix spread out flat and enormous under a sky that was already full of stars even at 7 in the evening. Vivian finished her glass and paid the check and walked back to the hotel in the cool January air, her coat buttoned, her hands in her pockets, thinking about nothing in particular and everything at once. She had a 6 o'clock flight home, she had a board meeting on Friday, she had work she was genuinely glad to do. That was enough. For now, it was exactly enough.